Good afternoon and welcome to the Cradle-to-Career Ad Hoc Committee for the Governance Manual Review. My name is Robert Tagorda and I'm the chair of this committee. Today marks our second committee meeting, which will be run according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, as required by law. We plan to end around 4:30 p.m. So I'd like to welcome the other members of this committee who are with me today. Welcome Member Cochran, Member Fong, Member Furgielli, and Member Payne. Next slide, please. Here's our agenda for today. As a reminder, the governance manual states, quote, "It will be a living document which will be amended by the governing board over time to reflect the evolution of the cradle-to-career system. Changes to the manual will be considered by an ad hoc board committee at least once per year at the second meeting after the start of the fiscal year," unquote. The committee last met on December 11, 2023. At that meeting, we approved almost two dozen sets of changes, and we discussed 4 topics in depth. Specifically, these 4 areas were governing board member expectations, advisory board member expectations, advisory board recommendation process, and the congruency of the role of the Community Engagement Advisory Board versus its authority. Today, we will be focused on these 4 areas and proposed wording, updating these sections based upon our discussion in December. I'd like to remind the committee that our work here today needs to be within the scope laid out in the charter. In addition, we have General Counsel Julia Blair, who can answer any questions that we may have today. Any changes decided upon today, as well as the changes identified in December, will be brought to the governing board at the February 28, 2024 meeting. So before we start today's work, I wanted to take a look at what lies in front of us. In total, there are 7 items on the agenda. Our agenda is posted on the C2C website, and it specifically notes the agenda items on which we will be accepting public comment. Today, members will be voting on 2 agenda items, and we will open it up for member dialogue on 3 items. In total, there will be 3 opportunities for the public to engage with the committee. All right, let's call the meeting to order and ask that Mary Kay Cruz-Jones please call the roll.
Member Tagorda.
Here.
Member Cochran.
Here.
Member Fong.
Here.
Member Furgielli.
Here.
Member Payne.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Let's now move on to agenda item number 2. Approval of the minutes from the December 11, 2023 Governance Manual Review Committee meeting. I'd like to ask, are there any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes from members? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I'd like to see if there's a motion to approve the December meeting minutes as submitted.
I'll move.
Member Cochran moves, and I hear Member Fong second. Before we vote, let's pause for public comment. If you want to comment on this agenda item, please note that comments should be limited to the October 2023 committee meeting minutes. Mary Kay Cruz-Jones, can you please confirm how many people are on the line wishing to comment via Zoom?
I see 1 hand raised. Perfect. So just as a reminder, I can unmute you in a second here, and your comment should be limited to the meeting minutes. Okay. You've been allowed to talk. I no longer actually see that person in the room, so maybe they left. Seeing no other hands raised, and having paused, we can close public comment at this time.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mary Kate Cruz Jones, please do a roll call vote.
Member Tagorda,
Yes.
Member Cochran,
Yes.
Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Furgiueli,
Yes.
Member Payne.
Aye.
5 ayes, the motion passes.
All right, with the motion passing, we're now at the next part of our agenda. As a reminder, the last time we met on December 11, 2023, we reviewed the proposed changes provided by the Cradle-to-Career office. We approved 6 corrections relating to grammar and stylistic changes. Moreover, we approved 13 corrections relating to additions, clarifications, and revisions to the governance manual, such as updates to the voting agreement scale, the executive director review process, and member protocols relating to communications, per diem, and travel expense claims, and member responsibilities as well. Lastly, we discussed 4 topics that centered on governing board and advisory board member expectations, advisory board recommendation process, and the congruency of the role of the Community Engagement Advisory Board versus the authority. And we gauged the committee's thoughts. Where we left off was with the committee passing a motion to approve the proposed edits as specified in the report, and then we delegated myself and Member Furgiueli to work offline in tandem with C2C staff to incorporate any additional amendments to these 4 sections. Next slide. So today, our conversation is going to be focused on reviewing and finalizing the draft language related to these 4 sections of the governance manual. We'll now take a look at that language. If you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. Please remember, there are 2 parts. One is a staff report with itemized changes, and the other is a redlined version of the governance manual. So to make this discussion as streamlined as possible, we have broken down the proposed wording into the 4 sections. Section 1 centers on governing board member expectations. Section 2, advisory board member expectations. Section 3, advisory board recommendation process. And Section 4, the congruency of the role of the Community Engagement Advisory Board versus the authority. So I'll facilitate us through the discussion here, and I respectfully ask that the office take notes and share the screen. This will allow members and the public to see in real time what is being captured, which will bring transparency and clear communication to this process. It will also be a working document should we have to continue this work offline after the committee meeting by designating 2 members to draft language based on our conversation today. All right, so you should see on the screen that it's being pulled up. Our notes are being pulled up. So our first item, let's see. Where would our first item? Mary Kate, I'm not seeing anything apart from the note screen. Is there something else that's supposed to be projected?
I had this open in case there were any notes to be taken. But yes, happy to pop over the 4 talking points. Give me one moment here, please.
Okay.
Okay, Robert, confirming that we have section 1 through 4 listed here.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So let's go section by section, and we begin with section 1, which would be governing board member expectations. Again, for members of the audience who can follow along with both the red line version as well as the staff report on this. Wanted to see from members of the committee whether there was any feedback, thoughts, or questions regarding what the proposed edits are to this particular section of the governance manual. I will say that one of the key parts to this is a bullet point specifically emphasizing supporting the governance culture with a focus on ambassadorship. And then sort of a definition of ambassadorship, which entails volunteering for liaison roles with the office and serving in committee or leadership roles, being responsive to and communicative with the office, representing the appointing agency as well as division of the data system and the work of the office. And then additionally, for data partner members, they may be asked to uphold internal deadlines between the office and their home agency, translate the vision of the data system to their home agency, and be responsible for practical coordination with their home agency and the office. This again fleshes out what we mean when we talk about one of our top priorities for the year, which is the establishment of a stronger governance culture within C2C. So any thoughts on this section from members of the committee?
Just
Debbie?
to break silence, I will just say I thought it all seemed very reasonable and well drafted. So thank you.
Fantastic. Anyone else? Gavin?
Agree. Agreed.
Wonderful. Seeing nodding heads. Let's
Same.
move on to the second section, which discusses advisory board member expectations. So here, one of the key points discussed in terms of proposed changes, attending all, articulating some of the expectations, attend all meetings, except in case of emergency circumstances, providing advance notice to the office with as much lead time as possible. If a member misses more than one meeting in a year, the office has the authority to ask the member to step down and offer the position to the runner-up that was approved during the selection process. So the one note I'd make there is there seems to be a missing, some missing verbiage, at least in the staff report that I'm seeing right now. I don't know if it's in the red line version, but we want to make sure that it's clear what the language is supposed to state, because it does indicate in the staff report, providing advance notice to the office with as much as possible. So I think it's, notice or lead time, whatever that language might need to be, just to clarify it. How about other members of the committee?
I will chime in with a couple questions or observations, more observations for consideration than necessarily recommendations. But that same provision that Robert was just talking about, there's kind of two components of it. One is that members should miss meetings only in an emergency. And then secondarily, if a member misses more than one meeting in a year, they might be asked to step down. And I just wanted to confirm. So the second question about the consequences of missing meetings seems to bear no relationship to the first sentence regarding the terms on which someone could miss a meeting. So for instance, if someone missed one meeting for an emergency basis, that sounds like it's allowed. If they miss a meeting for a non-emergency basis, extreme situation, they blow off the meeting, for instance, that's sort of in violation of the first sentence because it's not emergency circumstances, but it does not give the office the authority to ask them to step down because they have not missed more than one. So it was really if the intersection between those two components and whether there should be an intentional intersection there. So if it was misses meetings outside of emergency circumstances or misses more than one meeting a year under any circumstances, for instance. Does that make sense? Marianne, I'm looking at you. I'm trying
I
to
like
read your
that
face.
clarification, actually.
Yeah, it's good. Good
Is it,
observation.
is it possible to share what we're looking at so we're all on the same page about what we're looking at? Is that easier than having the notes up?
Sure. Give me
Because
one
I'm
minute.
not exactly sure what
Yeah.
I mean, I know generally what Debbie's looking at, but I want to make sure that,
We're all on the same page. Yes.
Yeah.
Good idea. One moment, please.
So just to react, I think as we switch gears to screen share the staff report, which might be the easiest way to look at it, and then maybe at the very end, we can highlight the notes taken on, here's the language as edited and look at that, and then we can proceed. Thank you to Debbie for her question. This is language that we drafted based on the last discussion, trying to balance exactly what you articulated very clearly, which is that we want to acknowledge the fact that the advisory boards meet only 3 times a year. So if someone were to miss, say, 2 out of 3 meetings, the participation would be quite limited. And combine that with the reality that emergencies happen, life happens, and trying to combine those two. So what you had mentioned verbally of saying, you know, missing meetings other than emergency circumstances or more than one a year, the office has the authority to do this. And I think that framing of saying the office has the authority to still gives us enough room that if there are extreme extenuating circumstances or something like that, that can always be taken into account. But if we don't hear from someone and they miss 2, you know, it just gives us an ability to ensure that the advisory boards are filled with people who are able to engage fully. So I think I heard what you were saying. We can perhaps continue to screen share for a moment so Chris and everyone can see that, and then pivot back to specific.
yeah, because I remember having similar confusion about the wording, and I thought the edits had addressed that, but I just want to make sure the edits made it through.
No, I think you were right there. It's right at the top of page 3.
Scroll down to the next page.
I think it's that
Yep,
next
right there.
section.
Right there.
And is this the same page in the red line? Is this the red line? Okay.
I'll just note that there's a word missing between much and as possible on the 2nd to 3rd lines.
So Debbie, your comment was, I think it's a keen observation. Is it critical for us to be more explicit about the nature of the missed meetings, given that it's so defined in that first sentence? Am I gathering that correctly?
I think it would be, I mean, I think that there's a clear consequence in the latter part of this red paragraph to missing multiple meetings, but there's no clear consequence to missing meetings outside of the allowable reasons for missing meetings. So that's where, you know, if someone did just blow off a meeting, for instance, one meeting, I would see how that might be a cause for concern for the office. But under this language, that would both be in violation of this provision, but not grant the office the authority to take action.
Yeah, I see. I hear what you're saying. So, do we want to provide language that takes into account perhaps the egregiousness of even one missed meeting? So, if it is it's a complete violation of the norm, should we provide more specificity here that can allow the office to have the authority to ask that member to step down, given the extreme case of that missed meeting?
I mean, one could
Yeah.
also take it the other direction and say, if a member misses more than one meeting in a year for any reason other than emergency circumstances, that makes a much more lenient standard. But similarly, I think just brings those two provisions into better cohesion.
I actually like that quite a lot.
Which one, Gavin?
To your second point, Debbie, that is that if a member misses more than one meeting for under any circumstances, the office has the authority. And just assume that people will not try to miss meetings, so there will be emergency circumstances that come up. I think that's what you were saying. Is that right? It's almost like you want to strike the first sentence.
The original language here, the first sentence was something like one absence is permissible. Anything beyond that, the office has the authority. And it basically was giving everyone the invitation to blow off a meeting. And to
It's true.
one meeting. So that's why the first sentence is, we expect you to attend every meeting unless there's an emergency. And I think what we were trying to do was avoid coming up with like an attendance policy, because that's not really what this is about. And it's basically setting the expectation that we expect you to be here every meeting. We do understand that emergencies happen, and please let us know in advance. If for any reason you miss more than one meeting in a year and it disrupts the flow of the board, then the office has the authority to make a change. So we're trying to provide as much flexibility to the office, but also make it clear that we're not offering a one meeting pass to everybody for any reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I agree with that goal. And this is where I think if we look at that second sentence alone, I think I would read that as still giving the one meeting pass potentially. So I think we could say in that second sentence, we could say, if a member misses any meetings, comma, or misses more than one meeting under emergency circumstances, comma, the office has the authority. So we're still kind of giving, it's all office authority. None of this is mandates, but it's still saying you blow off one meeting, the office has some potential recourse, but we're gonna provide allowance for emergencies.
I think that makes sense. I think the assumption, we were assuming that because the first sentence establishes that the only permissible absences are due to emergency. It was the assumption that there was no absence that wasn't an emergency. So, but I see what you're saying, and I agree that being more explicit would be better.
Member Cochran, do you have a proposed edit to what's on the screen right now for that second sentence, the start of that second sentence?
I think the best that I can try to restate what I said, and maybe if it's not possible,
Okay.
go back to. I mean, I think the other option would be you're basically, just to pull out that authority piece, right? Because I think that's what we don't want to have, is you don't want that authority language limited to more than one meeting. So you could say something, anyway, well, and maybe it is just easier to edit that one sentence. So I think we could maybe go back to the screen sharing, and we could work on, if we can copy and paste that sentence, and then we can work on it, or I can kind of work on it on the side and paste something into a chat or something. What works best for the group?
Okay, I will share the note document and I will add this doctored up language. Give me one moment here.
while we're waiting for that, just to fill the time for a moment, just for members of the public listening in, or for the record, I want to say this hasn't been an issue yet. I just want to give our advisory board members credit here, who've been exceptionally engaged and showing up for the meetings and being very thoughtful. So just wanted to make sure I say that out loud. I think it's very thoughtful to have this in place so that we can ensure in perpetuity, we, have the boards filled with people who are engaged. But just wanted to make sure I say that out loud.
I appreciate that. We'll take this as an opportunity to express our gratitude to our advisory board members who have been tremendously engaged in our work. So this is it's a matter of housekeeping for us to ensure that what we're establishing as a culture is also being enshrined in our governance manual. Okay, so here's our screen. You could see where we can make some edits to the language. Member Cochran, go for it.
I think maybe it would be if we start with that sentence, if a member misses any meeting outside of emergency circumstances, and then comma, or more than one meeting in a year. Now we have two more than. I think does that do it?
That still gives the free pass for one.
Well, it's a free, only if it's emergency, right? Because if they miss any meeting outside of emergency circumstances, the office has or.
So you could say, or more than one meeting under emergency circumstances. So that you're not.
So it's very explicit.
You could, or you could just take out if they miss any meeting outside of emergency circumstances.
Yeah.
And delete this.
Yeah. And then the grammatical issue in the sentence ahead, if we just end the sentence with office, providing advance notice to the office, I think that suffices, although I'm cognizant of notice and whether you in the office needed a lot of notice in these sorts of things. It doesn't tend to be the nature of emergencies.
If we want to keep that there, we can say with as much lead time as possible. Or we can, to your point, just end it right where it says office as well.
From the office's perspective, I think even just ending it after office suffices. I think the usefulness of this sentence is just to try to signal we need, if at all possible, we need to know if a member won't show up for quorum issues, especially if it's a meeting where the board's going to vote on something. So we need to know. And I think the second sentence as edited here is also helpful in that it sets the expectation that it's 100% meeting attendance and also acknowledging that emergencies happen. And these are not paid positions. These are slots filled by people who have full-time jobs or students or otherwise. So I think I feel like this language strikes a balance in saying we have the authority to request it while also enabling us to be humans in understanding emergency or extenuating circumstances.
So this is in terms of that second sentence now what it does say is if you miss any meeting outside of emergency circumstances, the office can ask you to step down, but one could seemingly miss limitless meetings under emergency circumstances. Is that a concern or no?
I'm personally not too concerned about it. I think, again, on balance, like this is not a paid position. It's people setting aside time aside from their life and work and everything else that they have going on. I don't think that this language leaves us with anything we couldn't manage. And personally, even with the inclusion of the first sentence saying attend all the meetings except in case of emergency, leaving in the clause or more than one meeting in a year, I think that leaves enough room for us to engage in this in a way that respects people's humanity. So I personally feel comfortable with that. Like I said, it has not been an issue to date in any sort of systematic way.
What about in the second sentence, instead of if a member misses any meeting, could it be something more general, like if a member's absences disrupts the work of the group, the office has the authority to so on and so on?
I'd only be concerned that that's sort of a judgment call by the office as to whether you're being disruptive or not. And could be misinterpreted.
Yes, I mean, I think we're belaboring this, I agree, but like an emergency can be in the eye of the beholder as well. We're not going to like check on emergencies, so there could be unlimited emergencies. But we're all talking theoretically here. Like I'm sure in practice this is never going to happen, but
Yeah, I think that this is enough for us to socialize among the members. So I'm satisfied with the language.
Agreed.
Sorry, quick question. I know that we just got 3 agrees. Would it be helpful to say attend all meetings and then removing except in case of emergency circumstances, comma, providing an advance notice to the office, and then having that second clause about emergency so you don't have the double emergency? Is that a helpful cleanup?
I actually think that's more clear. It sets expectation of attending all meetings, first and foremost.
I'll make the edit so people can see it visually.
So what I'm reading here is attend all meetings, providing advance notice to the office.
I suppose that's missing something. Of attendance.
Okay. Attend all meetings, providing advance notice to the office of any absences. Is that what we're saying?
Perhaps
Yeah,
if I can
think
make a
that-
suggestion.
Yes.
Attend all meetings, period. In the event of emergency, please provide advance notice to the office.
Attend all meetings, period. In the
Yep.
event of emergency,
Yep.
Mhm.
provide advance notice to the office.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you
So
go.
it's 2 separate thoughts.
So now it reads, attend all meetings. In the event of emergency, provide advance notice to the office. If a member misses any meeting outside of emergency circumstances, the office has the authority to ask the member to step down and offer the position to the runner-up that was approved during the selection process.
I like that.
I think it captures a lot of what we're, a lot of what we're going after here, which is, engaged participation, communication with the office, setting the expectation, and then having consequences in the event that it becomes an issue. So unless there are any other additions or objections, perhaps we can move on and we can proceed with this as our working document to be able to present to the full board in February.
So Robert, to that end, if folks are comfortable, I'm happy to stop sharing my screen, and to member Furgiueli's comment, we'll go back to the staff report.
Okay. So now we enter section 3.
Actually, I'm sorry, Robert. I did
Go
have
ahead.
other comments on section 2.
Okay, go ahead.
Probably just clarity issues. On the bottom of page 3. Yeah, okay, I think we were just, nope. I think scroll up. I think I'm in section 2 still. Scroll up a little bit further. I think, oh, you're right. That's on page, maybe we are on page. You know what? I think I am. I think I'm jumping ahead. I am on section 3.
Okay, no worries. Well, this is a good segue to section 3. Section 3 focuses on the advisory board recommendation process. So there's a lot of language here that we'd love to get the committee's feedback on. So the first year talks about the Data and Tools Advisory Board, the convening in a public session in the spring, what that meeting would entail, a proposal form being made publicly available, including not just from members of the public, but also including Community Engagement Advisory Board members to submit a proposal form. And then it fleshes out this process a little bit in greater detail in that ensuing paragraph. At least 2 weeks prior to the summer advisory board meeting, proposal forms will be due from members of the public. And then you can see sort of the rest there. Let me give a quick couple of minutes to the board just to kind of take a look at what's on the screen here and gather your thoughts so we can engage in discussion around these proposed revisions to the governance manual. Would any members of the committee like to begin the discussion here?
I'm happy to do that because I've already outed myself as having comments.
Yes, I was waiting for that.
I
Please
was trying to
proceed.
leave space. Okay, actually, if you just stop right there. This is more just a couple clarity questions. Right at the very end of the red here says at the summer advisory board meeting, the office will convene a public meeting. So I just was, is that the same meeting, or is that I sort of got lost in terms of process. Do you folks see what I'm looking at?
Yes, that is the same meeting.
Okay.
So I'm hearing it would be clear to say the office will convene a summer advisory board meeting where members can learn more about available data points.
Yes, I think that
We can clarify that.
Would be clear. I'm going to go ahead to my next one just because I think it's actually very related to the same point. It's about that same meeting, and just at the top of the next page, it says members will be provided dedicated time to publicly discuss the ideation of recommendations received from the public. That sounds like this is going to be a standing agenda item at the summer meeting. Is that the, okay. I wasn't sure if that also meant there would be provided dedicated time was outside of the context of a meeting or part of like kind of an official standing agenda item. Okay. That, I don't know if folks think that could be clearer, but those were just my 2 areas of confusion.
Noted on the need for clarity. That's part of why we created the graphic that's a page or 2 farther down. Because this has become a very complex process and we were trying to clarify, here's which meetings occur, here's what happens before each meeting.
I love the graphic.
Is intended to help bring some clarity to what is a quite complex process now.
It is very, the graphic was incredibly helpful.
Okay. Shout out to our design team.
Yes, thank you. I think that the graphic is very helpful. This is more of a preface than anything. If we make any suggested comments to any of the preceding language, let's make sure that it's also reflected in the graphic, so that we don't forget and that there's consistency. Okay, how about other members of the committee?
I have no comments.
No comments from Member Payne. How about from others?
One comment, where was it? I think it's scrolling up, like the very first part we were looking at here about convening the summer meeting. Yeah, so this is the meeting where advisory board members can learn about available data points and submit how is the learning happening?
The learning is happening through the conversations in the meeting and perhaps some questions they ask where we can provide information.
Okay, the part where it says submit questions to data providers about additional information that might be, this is very narrowly focused on the P20 data set data points, right?
It is focused on data points that either are in the P20W data set or that advisory board members might be considering making a recommendation to add something.
Right, but we're talking about data sets and data points, not broadly speaking information, because information could speak to a whole bunch of other things that's beyond data for data sets. So I think it would be helpful to say about additional data or data points that might be useful to access through C2C, but information more broadly speaking is like could be inappropriate for the context of a data set.
I'm pausing. This information about the additional information is old language from last year. I'm also on my screen looking at our summary graphic says data providers are invited to this meeting. They're not required to attend, as you know. They're invited to this meeting to answer questions about data. The Data and Tools Advisory Board can make recommendations about additional data points to add. They could also make recommendations about our data tools more broadly. So for example, once we have a data dashboard or a data story live, they might have a recommendation that says, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could disaggregate in the following way, or something like that has more to do with the data tool itself. So, and I do think some of the feedback that we got, I think, was to try to help elevate the fact that the Data and Tools Advisory Board recommendations need not be limited to saying, here are additional data points we want to add, but could be about our data tools more broadly.
Okay.
Right.
So
Here's how to use those
that,
components. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I guess that didn't jump out at me that we were talking about anything more than a process for suggesting new data points to add to the data set. But that makes sense to me. If that's understood, that I'm fine with that.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this before we proceed to the community engagement portion of this section? Okay, let's proceed down to the community engagement portion of this. So again, for members of the public, this is section 3 of our discussion today on advisory board recommendation, an advisory board recommendation process. We just got through talking about the Data and Tools Advisory Board. Now we're going to focus on the Community Engagement Advisory Board. So here the process is similar, but wanted to make sure that we give an opportunity to members of the committee to review this and ensure that we are comfortable with the language here.
I'm just noting a typo that we need to replace in the second paragraph that's currently shown. Data and Tools Advisory Board. Replace that with community engagement. I think we just did a cut and paste error.
There's another typo a few lines up yeah.
Any other comments on this? Perhaps we can also scroll down to the next page, which is related to this section, focusing on the proposal form and how it's intended to be submitted.
I would just before we move on to the next section, I think there were some of the language that we discussed for the first committee is repeated. So to the extent that the office decides clarifying language there would be helpful, with just a reminder to carry that through.
That's a very good point. So we want to be explicit about the application of the same sets of processes, both for the Data and Tools Advisory Board as well as the Community Engagement Advisory Board, and then have those items reflected in the graphic as well, to the extent that it's applicable. Any other comments from other members of the committee? Okay, seeing none. Why don't we proceed further through the staff report, where we will see this graphic, and then there are some comments or perspectives from the office on Section 3 changes. This is a good opportunity for us to have any last-minute suggestions or proposals before we proceed to Section 4. Okay.
I would also I would like to just add as a general note on this that I could definitely see the comments of from our last meeting really reflected through this document. So thank you to all who were a part of making that happen.
Wonderful. So let's now proceed to Section 4.
Sorry, Robert.
Yes.
Just for the clarity, because I didn't share screen. So I just wanted to be clear. Section 3 changes. We had the addition from Debbie, the clarification about the office will convene a summer meeting is the new wording. And then Marianne flagged a typo, as well as Chris Virguelli, in the community engagement sections. So we'll do a look over for everything else, but just wanted to resurface those changes as discussed. Anything
Excellent.
we're thinking of that has missing? Because I didn't.
No, that's I captured the same in my notes about the gist of that conversation. So thank you for summarizing the proposed revisions there. All right, that brings us now to Section 4, congruency of the role of the Community Engagement Advisory Board versus the authority. So the first part here discusses the authority, which includes language here in red. Members are encouraged to suggest communication structures that ensure a broad range of Californians know about and are using the tools and recommend tools that will change or that will address strategic objectives for the data system.
I would just change recommend to recommending.
Okay. I see. Yes. So where it says recommend tools, we will change it to recommending. So it would read that ensure a broad range of Californians know about and are using the tools and recommending tools that will address strategic objectives for the data system.
Sorry, just to clarify, Amy, if we change that to recommending, it would be the Californians who are doing the recommending as opposed to the members.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that because I thought what we were trying to do was encourage this feedback loop from the public through the community engagement advisory members. So it depends on what our priority is. So it could go either way, I guess.
Any thoughts from other members of the governance manual committee?
I wonder if it clarifies the intent to put a comma after using the tools, if we want to be clear that it's members that are doing the recommend.
Yeah, I think we have to, I think it's a decision, right? We need to decide what, who's doing the recommending, because it could be read either way.
Right.
So if we want to talk about, the responsibility is of the members. It might be helpful just to add members there, right? So it says using the tools and members recommend tools.
What if we flipped it and say members are encouraged to recommend tools that will address strategic objectives and to suggest communication structures?
So the suggestion there from member for GLE would be members are encouraged to recommend tools that will address strategic objectives for the data system and to suggest communication structures that ensure a broad range of Californians know about and are using the tools.
How about if we just add the word to in front of recommend? So we have members are encouraged to suggest, and then members are encouraged to recommend. So it reads a little bit more
consistent.
Parallel.
Friendly amendment. You could even say I would definitely put the comma in, and then you can say and can recommend.
May recommend.
And may, yeah.
Sure.
That I think that works really well.
Okay, so the proposed change from member Payne is to put a comma after using the tools and may recommend tools, so that it would read that ensure a broad range of Californians know about and are using the tools, comma, and may recommend tools that will address strategic objectives for the data system.
And for me, that puts sort of the right emphasis on the communications side of the obligation there. Let's use tools first, and then recommend changes second.
Nice. Sounds good. Would that work for other members of the committee?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yep.
All right. So then we proceed down to the end of this part. So in this section 4, I'm gonna steal Mary Kate's thunder here and summarize the change, which is just to that line. And it's a stylistic one, adding the comma and inserting the word may between and recommend for this section. Fantastic. So that brings us to our next slide, which would be member questions and comments. So is this where we are, member questions and comments? Yes, looks like we're there. So want to thank everyone for their invaluable insight and constructive dialogue. See if there's a motion to approve the proposed edits as specified. We would need to amend this. So move to approve the proposed edits as specified in the report and something that reflects what we just did right
And
now.
as amended by the committee.
There you go. Thank you. Move to approve the proposed edits as specified in the report and amended by the committee. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move.
A motion from member Payne. Do I see a second?
I'll second.
A second from member Cochran. And now with a motion and a second, we're open for public comment. Prior to doing so, I want to acknowledge and thank the Data for the People Coalition, who submitted a letter to members of our committee on many of the points that were discussed here today. We appreciate the insights, as we appreciate all of the public engagement that we receive. It's not something that we take for granted whatsoever. So I want to make sure that I take a quick moment to acknowledge that. And now also welcome other members of the public who may wish to comment on this item. Mary Kate Cruz-Jones, can you take us through this section?
Sure. So if there's anybody in the public that would like to make a comment on this agenda item, anything that we've reviewed, please feel free to raise your hand. There's an icon button in the lower part of your screen. I do want to say that I'm not seeing any members of the public with their hands raised wanting to comment. I'll give it another second here. Still no hands raised. So I'm happy to close public comment at this time.
Okay, so next slide, we have a motion and a second. We've had public comment. I'll now ask Mary Kate Cruz-Jones to perform a roll call vote.
Member Tagorda?
Yes.
Member Cochran?
Yes.
Member Fong?
Yes.
Member Frigielli?
Yes.
Member Payne?
Aye.
With 5 ayes, the motion passes.
Fantastic. We proceed to review of the next steps in the Governance Manual Review Committee process. As we're wrapping up today, I'd like to kind of elucidate here a little bit about what lies ahead. The next big decision point will be at our upcoming governing board meeting, where the board will be able to review the work of the committee today, and members will be able to adopt the proposed wording and changes that we have established today and throughout this committee process. Are there any additional questions or comments from members regarding our next steps? This slide explicitly describes when the governing board meeting will take place, and that's on Wednesday, February 28th. Any comments or questions from the board about our next steps? Okay, seeing none, we will now move on to general public comment. This section is reserved for general public comment. So Mary Kate, please walk us through this section.
Perfect. If there's any members of the public that would like to comment at this time, please feel free to raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, I am happy to close public comment.
Thank you. Although we did not receive any public comment, I did see some comments left in the chat. So I want to thank members of the public who posted some questions there, as well as some observations. And that brings us to our next agenda item, which is future agenda items. We will open it up to members, followed by members of the public. At this time, members of our committee can request items that they'd like to see as future agenda items. Any member comments here? Seeing none, we can proceed to members of the public who may have thoughts on this agenda item. Mary Kate?
If anyone would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please feel free to raise your hand. There are no hands raised at this time, but I'll give it another moment. Seeing no changes, we can close public comment. Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to move on to agenda item 7, which is adjournment. Before we call a motion for adjournment, I just want to thank everyone who joined us today, for members of the public who provided public comments throughout our entire committee process, and above all, for our 4 committee members who are here right now, Member Payne, Member Cochran, Member Fong, and Member Fergielli, who provided their hard work and expertise. Member Fergielli for reviewing portions of the draft offline between the first and second committee meetings, for the entire C2C team, for your ongoing support, as well as your facilitation of our discussion here today. And other members of the public who may not have contributed to this particular meeting, but have provided invaluable input at various points in all of the many opportunities that C2C has for public engagement. So now I'd like to formally invite interested members of the public to join us in person in Sacramento or virtually for our upcoming governing board meeting on Wednesday, February 28th, where we will be hearing more about this topic. And now I'd like to see if there's a motion to adjourn.
Happy to move.
Second.
Move to adjourn from Member Fong and second from Member Fergielli. I'd now like to adjourn the meeting at 3:34 p.m. and thank everyone once again for your participation.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you all.